Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to a talk, platform talk on a beautiful sunny day. We are 2 hours earlier than our usual dates today because of Pride festivities happening in front of our door, and also to allow our audience to join afterwards the parade. We have today here the pleasure to welcome Philippe Rekacewicz for a talk titled Radical Mapping, a practice between art, science and politics. And in this talk, Philippe will unfold some of the complexities that are embedded in making maps and also in some ways in reading maps, in looking into the social and political implications that lie within map making as a practice. And I found another talk or text by Philippe which also describes the topic quite nicely: between science and politics, the art of making visible what the world hides from us. And another quote, there is no such thing as an innocent map. This underlines in a way or gives an impression of the topic, and it's very connected to the exhibition that we're showing at the moment by Toril Johannessen, the festival exhibition 2024, Deterrence and Reassurance, in which map mapping plays a crucial role. And so the talk looks into some of these mechanisms and methodologies that are also very important for Toril Johannessen as an artist and for the exhibition to understand and dig a bit deeper in some of the topics and methodologies. I met Philippe Rekacewicz a long time ago, initially through the radical architecture magazine Architektur, through a project about mapping border geographies, and this was taking place, for example, on the example of the refugee camp Sangatte, which is close to Calais in France. Philippe at that point was becoming increasingly prominent as one of the authors of a publication, The Atlas of Globalization, that was published by the French monthly newspaper Le Monde Diplomatique. And this has been, in the meantime, published in many different editions and also many different languages. In the context of these publications, Philippe also entered the discourse of artistic debates, and here he took a very strong position looking into maps as a methodology that not only relates to politics or publishing or newspapers, but also artistic practices. And from there also making the very strong argument that map making is actually at its core has to do with political argumentation. So making a map is always bringing a political argument forward. And this is also something that I think we will talk about today. As I said, like, there's no such thing as an innocent map, and it's also not innocent because it comes with an argument. Philippe has been connected to artistic practices also throughout his career. There's another French collective I wanted to mention, Bureau d'Etudes, who since the 2000s maybe have been around quite a bit with large-scale mapping projects. But in education, Philippe has been a geographer, cartographer and information designer, and had studied geography at the University in Paris. And from 1988 to 2014, he was a permanent contributor to Le Monde Diplomatique, and has been working a lot on this, on the Atlas of Globalization that I mentioned. At the same time, from 1996 to 2008, he headed the cartographic unit of the United Nations Environment Programme, located in Norway, in Arendal, and led numerous missions to Central Asia and the Caucasus as part of the multidisciplinary environment and security program. So we were very kind of pleasantly surprised to learn that you did not have to travel very far, which was kind of amazing to have such a key thinker on maps within Norway and close by, and working on it in an international scale. Since January 2001, he has been a research associate attached to the Department of Social Science of the Wageningen University in the Netherlands as part of the Embodied Ecologies program. And he has recently published or co-published a book, Cartography, Radicale Exploration, published in French by les Éditions La Découverte, which came out in 2021. Yeah. So this talk takes place as part of our series Plattform, which is a series of lectures and debates with artists and prominent thinkers. And as always in this series, the event is live streamed. There's cameras here in the space. There are seats in the back towards the windows which are not captured by the camera. If you don't feel comfortable with being filmed, please take a seat there. We have toilets here and downstairs, and we plan around 45 minutes for the presentation, the talk, and afterwards there will be a possibility for questions. And because the event is live streamed, we kindly ask you to use the microphone so that the questions are also heard digitally, and the microphone will be then handed around. Thank you to the live team and everybody who produced this event today, Nora, Silja, Sophia, Henrik, and Ingvild. And thanks again, Philippe, for joining us today. Thanks. We're looking forward to the conversation.
That's my term then. Yeah, as you understand, living in Norway for 30 years approximately, I'm part of the Norwegian connection. And my collaboration to the university is not 2001, but 2021. And I had another program before with the University of Helsinki, which was called Cross-Location, and we were studying the various ways to define borders in the Mediterranean area. So I left the institution, the bureaucracy of the UN bureaucracy for the research world, which is a little bit more free, a little bit less censorship. So for citizens. So we're here for 45 minutes, and this is a challenge because I had a lot of things to tell you. Then 45 minutes looks like very, very little time, so I had to cut a lot. But luckily, we have a website which is entirely free, accessible 7 days a week, all year long, 24 hours. And it's an open source, so you can even download everything, all image, text. We have even text in Norwegian in there. So we're here to speak, to address, and to see what kind of relationship we have between mapping and the world of art. And when since 2 decades, it was very obvious that we geographer, we have mapping and cartography as major medium, and mapping means drawing, and we draw with what? With forms, with colors, with dynamics, so with the means of art. So we are a little bit artists, although I have difficulties to recognize myself as an artist, and so far it's not me choosing. So museums are buying eventually buying my maps, but I didn't still do this advance to consider myself as an artist, but more as a geographer, which has a message to convey. So we start by saying what is mapping versus radical mapping or critical cartography. To make it simple, we can say that it's producing maps indifferently than the traditional way, or the orthodox way, which consists basically to answer the question, where we are, where are objects. Of course, there is an obvious need to identify things, countries, nations, make planes to fly appropriately, boats to sail appropriately, and this leads to cartography, which is very descriptive. But such an approach of mapping completely overlooks the political and social use of maps, its role both in propaganda or protest. It works both ways. So since early 2000s, and of course in no particular order, a cartographic practice has been emerging or re-emerging, because it was existing already in the 60s, especially with the geographer, American geographer. His name is William Bunge, and of course in 45 minutes I will not address William Bunge, but he is probably the father of the radical or the critical approach of geography and cartography. And we can seek in internet. And this re-emerging type of practice of cartography, we call it radical, but also critical or counter-cartography. There is a lot of names, but it's the same thing, and then we can say at the end, this is a rich combination of art, science, geography, politics, and social activism. It covers a wide range of themes: finance, surveillance and security, marketing, environment, territorial organizations, just to give a few examples. And it's also taking full advantage of the power of participatory mapping and social networking tools, which means that we were relatively lonely as geographer and cartographer working until the end of the 20th century, alone working with our database and putting together the maps. And since the year 2000, we became a bit more collective. Axel was mentioning this meeting in Berlin in the early 2003. That was really the beginning of, we are very well narrowly connected. We exchange data, we exchange information, we're completely open. We are not keeping the things for us. And when we have a cartographic project, we worked with 2, 3, 10, many people. Quoting Trevor Paglen, for example, which has led a project with hundreds of people, which were sending to him, the route, the place of all the CIA and FBI flights that was flying all over the world to catch so-called terrorists in Afghanistan, Mauritania, etc., to bring them back to places where they were imprisoned. He has done this thanks to the huge network of people which were sending information. He had his database, and then he made the map. So this collective aspect is pretty important. In this respect, I would say that one of my most important prerequisite idea is that the map is a social and political act beyond the fact it's a way of representing or figurating the world, but beyond this, I would consider it more as a social and political act. So radical, critical, alternative, participative, collective, mental, emotional mapping, sensorial mapping, this is a lot of different practices, but all these names covers the same practice of mapping. So we can call it experimental mapping because we do a lot of differences. And it makes becoming the map not the representation of the world, but the representation of the way we feel the world, we understand the world, we interpret the world, as the examples that I will show you in a second. And the second idea, beyond the fact that the map is a social and political act, it goes together with, there is no such thing as an innocent map, because each map has a meaning. It's not the reality, it doesn't represent the reality, it represents the way you see the reality, it involves imaginary, fantasy, it's a mix of the two. So I used to say, and this is my third idea, that the map is a permanent dialogue between the reality and the fantasy, the reality and the imaginary. It takes out of the reality, because what we map is real, but this is most our interpretation that appear to be the map. So then, based on experience, we go a little bit forward. Personal experience comes as a prolongation to this cartographic practice, experimental. And now we can speak about sensorial mapping and even experiential mapping. I have seen this 15 days ago, some research centers. They are launching a process, a research project called experiential mapping. This is you go to a place and you map what you feel, what you experience as an insider. I have to say that most of the time we cartographers, we are mapping territories, things from the outside, as outsiders. And sometimes we are even mapping places where we have never been. So we have to trust the data or the people bringing us the information. But now, which is more and more fashion, so to speak, is to say that we are inside the territory, inside the place, and we look around and we map what we feel out of the place. and we call it experiential mapping. Like, for example, this map that we've been doing with one of our students in the Philippines, in Manila, Sofia Pelago. And this is what I do with them, to try to go around with protocols and to define where are, according to her, healthy place and toxic place. And depict it with the mean of semiology and geometry. Here, this one is interesting because we were working on the concept of toxicity. And I thought that toxicity was polluted water, bad air, bad smells, industry area. And suddenly we see this super modern shopping mall, very clean, air conditioning, super modern, and she put it on the highest level of toxicity. And there is 3 reasons to extend the idea of toxicity. It's red. First, you can't go there by foot or by public transport. You have to use a car, very bad for the environment and for the CO2. Secondly, there is air conditioning, very bad because it uses the electricity that they don't have here in the slum, just used for the thing. And third, highest level of toxicity, they push you to spend the money you don't have, making very easy the credits. Okay, take this TV, take this good, and then you will pay in 5 months or 6 months with money that obviously the people which are living here doesn't have. So this is what is experiential mapping, cartography. This is the feelings that something is very bad and to figure it out on the map. Yes, I think this is it. And it's not new, it's since long. And it was actually a surprise for me when I started because I considered myself as an academic, making maps very complex because I wanted to show that I was working a lot, you know. And I found, so I have this relationship to art and to museum since very long, although I have the impression that I love it. I love when my maps are in the museum. And I think the museums have shown a lot of love for my work and the work, and actually maps of other cartographers or artists, like I'm sure museums love the map of Toril. But I found it very strange to find myself in art museum, either to talk about a particular scientific discipline, we speak about geography and cartography, or more broadly the visual representation of data, that in a way emancipates itself from the academy and interests the art world, or the players that are in the art world, the actors of the art world. Or that our cartographic creations are being exhibited in museum, having in a way changed from the status of scientific object, a map represents the world, or how the world is functioning, to that of work of art. So suddenly the work maybe has a spirit. It's concretely made out of shape, movements, color, which have a soul, install an atmosphere to which visitors to the museum can be sensitive. Then suddenly we are creating a political map which are in the museum, which are exposed, and which interrogates the curiosity of the public because they arrive as a layman, as layperson, completely new to this discipline, and they have to discover this. So we have to make it accessible. So this is also the challenge. It's okay to expose maps, but we have also to make understand what it is, what we do, and why we do it. So coming back to the cartographic intention, the message, what message it is, and it's maybe the difference with, I would say, normal artwork, which relies more on forms, aesthetic. They also could have a meaning. The artist wants to say something and he expresses it through forms, colors, point line, etc. So this was, for example, in the Museum of History of Immigration in Paris, 2019, where they were interested to have a set of map artwork speaking about how this migratory circulation is doing. And we go back to this map a little bit later. Other exhibits, Detox, 96 or 97, Northern Norway in Kirkenes. An artist from Mexico, Minerva Cuevas, sorry. And actually, in this exhibit, there was also Pick and Pobrois, or the former Pick and Pobrois, because I understood they changed, were also participating. And Minerva was really concerned by the fact that military activity, so we are really in the subject, because we turn around the military activity, was disastrous for the environment, and then was processing a sort of ecocide of the places just by the base. So she has done this artwork, and together with this artwork, you had to tear it, to spatialize it, and then she thought the best way to spatialize it is to associate my artwork with a map, and this is how she called me, to get a sense of this map, which is more scientific, which shows exactly where the problems are lying. Another experience was in Moscow, Musée Garage, a whole project on how the movie makers from Africa and from Asia were denied the right to learn cinema in Hollywood. So they turned towards Soviet Union, they were in Moscow. And then the idea of the museum, so now it's a little bit strange to speak about Russia and this Russian initiative, it was in 2015. They wanted to show that Soviet Union, which is usually represented in red, like really the bad guy, the guy who's threatened. They wanted to show without red that Soviet Union and Moscow, they have been implementing a very important soft power actions toward those countries in Africa, attracting movie makers, intellectuals to the university where they have been trained. And today, most of the most prominent movie maker in African movie maker or Asian or Arab movie maker were trained in Soviet Union, in Moscow. And the idea here was, on top of that, to implement a design which was typically a Soviet design. So before doing these 13 meters drawing maps, it was 13 meters on 3.5 meters. It was absolutely enormous. I have studied the design of the most prominent Soviet designers so that I could get in the style, as you see. And all this will be available, of course, on the website if you want to go a little bit closer. Here we don't have so much time. And this last project to present, that was Museum of Contemporary Art in Metz in France, was a whole work around geography of war. Where is war? Where is the conflicts happening? And the idea here, and this is where I'm meeting also, we are here in the context of the exhibit of Toril Johannessen, to work with enormous database and transforming all those numbers, all those tables, all those Excel files in a drawing, in some things which tells us immediately that we have, in one look, we understand what it is. Here, the idea is we had a database with 200 years of wars, small and big wars, all over the world. So it's more than 10,000. And those 10,000, the idea was to figure out and to represent it in a graphical way. So we have done this huge, I don't know the word in English, frieze, this huge timeline, which is also 13 meters wide, which shows all the conflict, actually at the same time as by the number of fatalities and how they spread through time. So you have conflict which is 1 year, conflict 5 years, and you have conflicts which are 100 years, and conflicts which are 30 years. In the museum, this is why I said in the title that they are loving, the museum are loving map, and it looks like at the end from far like this. And what I'm interested in is that you can get very close to the artwork, and you can look from very close what it is looking like, what is the story. That's what you can say, and you can walk the 13 meters and then recognize yourself, the country and the conflict where you are. And at the end of the graphic, you can move the words because it stops in 2016. Now it's 10 years. And I have prepared the file so that anybody can come and continue to draw what has happened those last 10 years. So this is part of the art approach to not finish an artwork when there is a timeline involved, especially when there is a graphic, and I let 10 or 20 years completely empty, and I deliver to the museum with pen or with colors, so that you could possibly continue the work. And of course, now we would have Gaza, we would have Ukraine, we would have South Sudan, we would have RDC, etc. As a good old geographer, also, we used to accompany the artwork, the map, the timeline, together with context. Geographers love to put things in context. We work with scales. We work with time, but we work with scale. So it's very important that we have the context of war, just to make understand where we are. So I just show this one because we have been also working very much on the form, which just represents what is the weight of one country toward all the other countries. So it's just showing that United States represent half of the world military capacity, just one, toward 127, 120 or 30 countries. So now we are in museum like Great Masters, which is very intimidating for me. Since, as I said, I don't consider myself as an artist, but rather as a cartographer, or to be more precise, a visualizer of data extracted from the world, extracted from database, or information designer, as our great Otto Neurath liked to call himself. And I think information designer is a better definition of what I feel to be, because I avoid to be an artist, which I'm not, and at the same time I enter a little bit in the world of art. Otto and Maria Neurath, they were graphists, but they were also philosophers, sociologists, information designer then, and he has created the isotype system, which was popularizing maps and visual representation of statistics. And himself, having organized a lot exhibits also in Vienna, but also in Soviet Union, where he was working between 1929 and 1937. So this isotype was also a very interesting approach, because he had a lot of data, huge amount of data, and he was doing already at the time, putting everything on a map and getting rid of layers. This I don't need, this line I don't need, this I don't need, to finally having proposing artworks which are very minimalist. And the idea for him, he was a socialist, he wanted that everybody has access to the knowledge. Even though which were workers, which were illiterate, there was a lot in 1920, 25, and he wanted everybody to access the political and geopolitical knowledge. And this is why he has created all geopolitical atlas with minimum amount of words, but a lot of symbology, a lot of symbols, so that it can... and he has invented a lot of things, like, for example, from far, as you see in this one, you have the impression that each little fellow that represents population has a shadow. What I find interesting in his way to do, and it's very clever disposition, the shadow is actually the name of the city. So he's so minimalistic that he thinks, okay, I can use the name as a shadow, so I don't need to make the shadow and the name, which would make my map very noisy. And all his work turns toward this. I have the chronometer here, it goes so fast. So, I'm very happy to be in museum then, but I like very much that this is the others that decide that the maps that I'm producing, creating, are legitimate to be in the museum. This said, the world of art are interested in mapping because it has a meaning, because it has forms, colors, and because it's political, and since 2 or 3 decades, museums, exhibition hall are very interested by the so-called political act, political arts, I would say. So 20 years ago, here are an architecture. In 2003, I was invited to take part of a somewhat very informal meeting in Berlin, where several groups of researchers, artists, and activists had the opportunity to share their approach to radical cartography. It was an initiative of two German artists, Alice Kreischer and Andreas Sigmann, still operating in Berlin. And they called this initiative Other Maps for Seeing the World Differently. That's what I said at the beginning. 20 years ago, it was not so usual to say that we make a meeting, we meet each other, morally and formally, to discuss on the other way to make maps and other way of seeing the world differently, without saying that we were seeing the world a specific way, so it was underlined. And the title was a clear indication of the desire to produce alternative vision of the world and to get out of the conventional way of it. The meeting in top of that took place in Hebel Theater, so this was a theater, there was a scene, and we all presented our work and our approach on a stage. And on the stage, there is usually actors which are playing. So we were also playing. It motivated us to play on stage the role of cartographers with our maps, with our accessories. And then suddenly we understood that we can stage a map, really. I will give, if I don't go over my time, I will give an example, a very good example on the way to perform a map. And this is a new trend which is extremely promising, actually. So among the participants, there were proudly an architecture group, proudly represented here by Alex, and this group has invited me in one of the apartment of the member. It was in a kitchen, so we were drinking a little bit of wine, and they asked me to draw the world just on the blank sheet. And this is the result. I found it again. Probably my first representation of the world by hand without any model. And I presented it to you today because it's it's a perfect metaphor of the theme on which we reflect. Distortion. More you draw places far away from where you live, more distorted it is. We lose the sense of form, shapes with the distance. It means that even us, professionals of maps, we are unable to, we have a very, very bad, a very poor idea of the representation of the space if we don't have this map and this model, if we do it mentally. And then, I didn't know if you would come. We have the artist today, which is in the museum. A few years ago, I discovered the work of Toril Johannessen, the paintings in one room of the Bergen Art Museum just beside. And perhaps I would say graphic, but it was an art museum, so I consider them some works of art. And I was formidably surprised to see the work hanging on the wall in a museum that resembled so much in every way in my daily works as a data illustrator at the time for deadly boring institutions. And I thought, I do all those graphics, it's deadly boring, the reports are boring, the institutions are boring. Somehow, I do it, and then suddenly I'm going to come into Bergen. I'm just impressed by all the artwork, and I find these things. And on a closer look, I felt completely under the charm of this very scientifically constructed representation in which you can see the enormous amount of work that went into collecting data. At the same time, there were documents that conveyed really knowledge in a very academic way, but at the same time also with really beautiful poetry, a bit of mystery, in probably associating concepts and terms that seems to have little in common. Desire and greed, for example, hope and reality, but also precisely themes which a lot of meaning And then, of course, the figures say something, revolutions. We have really the impression that around the year 2010, it happened something in the fact that in these academic journals, they use much more the terms. I didn't mention it, but all the figures are based on the occurrence, the number of articles that Toril has found on the whole collection of an academic paper or a magazine from the 20s to today, basically. Greed and desire. And, for example, feminism. So this one is interesting in many sense because it's the occurrence of the word feminism. And all this really invite us to a little bit to think, to dream, to reflect. So it's not an end in itself, it's maybe the beginning of a reflection. This is also this that I found very, very interesting. And I have the impression that I was in this, and afterwards, came after the year 2010, I was in the same spirit, making the same approach that we use when creating and producing maps out of data. So then come the question, what is a map and what's its relationship with art? So I want to be a little bit more theoretical here, and for saying that I consider all what we see the map is a visual composition, and the cartographer is more or less the intuitive interface between the reality and the transposition of this reality. It's a visual answers to questions of social, geography, geopolitics, law, economics. And above everything, it helps me to contextualize issues in time and space, gaining a better understanding of ongoing political and social processes. We need to better understand the extremely complex, systemic and interrelated nature of all the events in the world, and probably mapping helps us. But in the creation process, before the map is always the draft. We say in French, we have a very nice saying, but I don't know how to translate it in English. We say in French, l'image de pensée. This is the image you have in your brain when you create, you have an idea of something, and it takes form in your soul, in your brain. Image de pensée, la pensée, thinking in English. L'image de pensée, this is this. The image de pensée, that was in a coffee shop, Café Prückel in Vienna. The curator of the Vienna Museum asked me, how do you see the relationship between Africa and the rest of the world? That was the question. And I thought about something and I drew it on the napkin. And it became what we have been exposed, and then a figure, which is a machinery like the one Jean Tinguely has done by the past. He is a source of inspiration that shows in one gaze, in one look, all the way that you have this poor Africa taken into the chains of the world, the FMI, the cooperations, the FDI, etc., all the countries, and why it's a problem. So this is a way to transfer the reality. And after all, this is what we do. All the maps you can see in this exhibit, for example, goes through the same process: an ID, a database, and a visual representation. Now, the map is also to be, it's the theoretical part, but don't worry, this won't last. There is more concrete example afterwards. But it was very important for me to convey also this message that we were supposed to work in 2 dimensions. The spatial, the spatiality, because we are making a map, so the map is above everything. Spatial extension, but also into the temporality. And we see that it's very difficult to pile different periods on the same map or on the same artwork, because after a moment there is so many piles or so many dates that you don't see. So there is simply solutions to produce collection of maps. This is what Toril Johannessen has done already to show a situation in 90, 2000, 2010, 2020. This is a quadriptych or a triptych or a diptych. And this is very practical because when you go from far, then you can see the evolution. And I would add 2 dimensions to the temporality and the spatiality. This is the verticality, and this is very new, just because we are in the space. Yeah, in the space there is a lot of happen. There is flight, there is Sputnik, etc. But there is also drone, and the drones will have more and more impact on our life. And the drones are in the vertical dimension, and above also because. We are interested by what is in the underground and under the sea, also as an economic mean. And the fourth one, this is the fantasy and the imagination, as I said, because it has an extremely important impact on the way we see the world. So the multi-dimensional way of mapping is not only those 2 spatial and temporal dimensions, we have to add those 2, which make it even more complex, but we have to think about it. The last, a little bit theoretical things I wanted to show you, and after I would like to show you some projects to illustrate what I say. I would like to show you where we are in cartographic practice to see the complexity. So this is why I have prepared shortly these figures, where you have in the center mapping, and in the process of mapping we have clearly 2 stages. First stage is the elaboration and the preparation, which involved, so this is where you collect the data, where you process the data using science, where you define your intentions, and where you apply the ethic values. And when I speak about ethic values, people that don't understand very much what means ethic values. And the example I usually give is these American maps in the 50s, which were representing reservation. And they put animal reservation, birds reservation, or Indian reservation on the same map without any difference. And of course, as you understand, this is far to be the ethic, because you cannot put Indian reservation together with biodiversity and etc. And then you have the production techniques, which is also a very important part, which is involving aesthetic and technique, so that you could create and produce and finalize the document. And the process is so complex between the intention, collecting the data, processing the data, making the first draft and finalizing it, that we need to have this reference, these spots in a way. Now, I have 10-15 minutes to complete this, and I would like to present you some of the projects that illustrate this long introduction. Mapping migrations or migratory circulations and borders, this is probably something which is very problematic and very challenging, because there is so many people traveling in all sense that it's complicated. I found this document that I have done, but I thought it was very interesting to see it in Berlin, in a place called the Futurarium, and they have installations where, and one of these installations is looking like migration. Maybe I was not clear enough, but I wanted also to say that the maps is very much helping to deconstruct narratives which are completely fake. And sometimes the narrative doesn't pass the test of the data. This represents all migration in the world by volumes of people traveling. And if they say that in America or in Europe there is a threat, there is a risk of huge waves of migrants coming, threatening our civilization, threatening our political system, our democracies, you can say that it's wrong, because even there is 2 million people coming in Europe, out of 528 million people, this is nothing. And even 2 million, they would be good for our social security system if we would let them in. But this is what the map shows, that most of the movements are inside Europe, not outside, as you see, because the threat would be here, internal of China, and a little bit between the countries in North America. So this is where we have really the power of the political map, and I'm very happy it's in a museum in Berlin. It can be seen by a lot of people, because it really kills the narrative that are killing us, politically speaking, especially in a period where today in Europe, everywhere, there is a crispation on far right. The far right is raising, totalitarianism is coming. We can see more and more far right political party being more and more successful. This is, I think this is the threat, basically, and this is where we, cartographer, geographer, artists, have a role to play to fight against by informing the world. Speaking about how we would represent the idea of the world which is closed or open, we have here one of the representation of what would be sanctuarization of the world. Places where, you see this bad red teeth pushing back 2/3 of humanity, forbidding them to come in. It's a world which is walled, a walled world with all those worlds. The problem is that we have a projection with Europe at the center. Another way to see it is to do something very simple, to show you want to come in Europe, whether you need a visa, whether you don't need a visa. If you need a visa, it's 50, 40 euros, and it's red. And you see that there is, we geographers, we love concentration. So this is perfect symmetry, where the friends are and welcome in Europe, and where all 2/3 of the humanity, mainly Asia and Africa, are unwelcome, and if they want to come, they have to get a visa. And very often they don't have a visa, or we don't allow them to have a visa. And this is why we have this disastrous situation in the Mediterranean. Another perspective, it's from Theo Duttinger, it's an architect from the Netherlands. He shows the sanctuarization much better than the map with Europe at the center. And you see that here we project ourselves. It's a world where it doesn't exist in the reality, but it exists in the reality. It's both ways. The world doesn't exist, but formally, with the political decisions, with the law, with the implementation of the military forces protecting this triad, this world exists virtually, but also physically, although there is no wall at all in the sea, or yes, there is a wall between Mexico and the United States, and there is part of the wall in borders in Europe. But we are here really very, very much in the case where you have an interaction between the reality and the fantasy. It's this dialogue, and this is what I find very interesting in this representation. Then, if we forbid the people to come, this is what we have. Here, again, a representation of the border. You can see that the red line, which is the official border and the most deadly in the world, I think we have 55,000 people who died trying to cross this border because we were preventing them to cross it by legal way. And then, this is the border. And you have this pre-border here. This pre-border, this is the places where the police of Mali, Burkina Faso, they already arrest the migrants far away from Europe, put them in camp, pre-border of Europe. And we pay, I mean, European taxpayers pay for that. And the black dot, which is the post-border, where we arrest the people which are irregular in Europe, gather them in center, prison in center, and bring them back by plane to where we think they are coming from. Which means that the border today, the map is here to explain that the border is not anymore a line. The border becomes the territory. This is this new things that we are not aware of. The border is pixelized. This is a pixelization of border. The border becomes the territory. It's a fusion between the territory and the border. The border is everywhere. You're not safe in any place when you don't have the paper, when you are irregular, when you're a migrant. Two more. Now we have been producing this series, The World Seen From. We were also interested to have other perspectives. Other perspective is that we see Europe from our French perspective, or Europe from the Norwegian perspective. And it's not the same. So we had organized a research project around looking for how people in different countries were seeing themselves in the world. Berlin, Warsaw, Brasilia, there was Beijing, and I want to show, so all of them are very interesting, but I want to show one. The idea here was to go through interview with a sample of people, 20, 25, taken in the Polish society, and ask them the question, how do you see yourself in Europe? How do you see Europe? How do you see Poland in Europe? What's the threat? What's the asset? What is promising? What are you scared of? What are you happy of? And then always this image de pensée. I'm very much working with this image de pensée, and sometimes I think that the image de pensée is enough, that this draft is moving enough, and then it should remain something like that. It's probably an artwork in itself. But it has to be clean to be presented to the public so that they understand. And finally, we have this cleaned image that shows a very unusual Europe coming from Poland, where, for example, they feel there is a huge threat from Russia and Germany because they have been shared 4 times in their history. And the recent history shows also that this is real. And suddenly we see appear this green zone, which is the buffer zone they have organized in their policy, like spending hundreds of millions of euros to secure friendship with those countries, except Belarus, of course, which is more. But Belarus has also a role of buffer, but not exactly the same as the Baltic country and the rest. So geographically, it's very clear that it is like that. And those very ugly violet gas pipeline, which for Polish, so in 2006, the defense minister of Poland said, Nord Stream, the pipeline, is the worst attack since the Ribbentrop Pact in 1939. So that's a very strong statement, an act of war, a declaration of war. And of course, Putin has decided to build it because he wanted to avoid that the energy goes through Poland and then getting out a lot of money that Russia has to pay for the transfer through the country. So it's not infrastructure to transport gas, it's a political act. And this is also what the map is showing. I will be on time. The last thing I want to show to you is an exercise which I think lots of us has been through, because I was speaking about managing a lot of data and how do we do with data. So and then an elementary table with a lot of complexity. How do we work on it, and how do we synthesize? How do we reduce the number of occurrence and the complexity? With this example, this was the Security Council has each year an initiative, and they have a thematic where they gather 192 countries to express themselves on a subject. And the theme was, shall we produce or not mass destruction weapon? Nuclear, biologic, all mass destruction, but it's mainly nuclear. So there was 192 countries. They asked 80 questions. For each of these 80 questions, very precise, are you for or against? Are you for the production of mass destruction weapon? Each time they have to answer yes, no, or abstain. So it means you have 80 multiplied by 192 response. And then you have a table with 16 or 17,000 things. And you can't do anything with this. So the idea, and this is Jacques Bertin, the geographer Jacques Bertin, which in 1967 has written a book called...
Il est 13 heures.
Oui. I did it on purpose. A book called Graphical Semiology, and he explains how to reduce complexity, how to reduce those huge databases. So this is basically to take a simple Excel file or a tabular and plot in columns all the questions and in lines all the countries. And then you have this image. And then after that, you move the lines to regroup what is looking like, and to move the columns to regroup what it's looking like. It's a system that everybody can do. He wanted that not only scientists or statisticians could do this with very complex software, with multifactorial, etc. He wanted it to be accessible to everybody. So this is very simple. You do this, and at the end, when you have sorted everything, you have this image. You have diagonalized the thing. So you have all the countries which are looking like red. So red is they said no. Yellow it's abstent, and green is they said yes to the question, whatever the question is. Yes. So and when you look at from close, you have the countries and the questions, but you see here that you can define some profile. So on the map, it means that all those countries will behave the same, so they will have the same color or the same form. Here we have another profile with this whole green here. We don't know what it is, but it's interesting. And here another profile, and here another profile. So the 6 or 7 profile leads us to identify what country it is, and then we can go to the visual representation of this. So there is many stages, and of course in 45 minutes I'm not going to detail all of the stages, so don't worry about that. But I'm interested to present you the result, the direct result, which is completely a production of knowledge under an artistic form, where the geography relative to projections that would be centered on Europe here. So all the countries, they are more or less in place relatively to each other, where you have very clearly the heart of the nuclear power, United States, United Kingdom, France, Israel. The heart of the second nuclear power, they vote very differently, and this nuclear power, they vote differently. So this is the 3 threat, and this has appeared only through the analysis of the way they vote. We didn't know before that they were not agree on all the questions. That there was a huge difference on the biologic weapons, on the nuclear weapons, etc. Here you have the first circle friend, all the friends of first. So I think Norway is not far from here. It's here. And the second circle. So they vote like at least 60% the same as them, and here they vote at least 40% the same as them. So, and here you have an whole ensemble of allies, very clear. Without surprise, former Soviet Union is all together. Here, a huge surprise, Palau, which is usually voting like United States, they vote more like China, Pakistan, India. And all around, what we call the 77 group, the global south, those which are rejecting everything. And here, it's very interesting circles, Iran, Syria, North Korea, Zimbabwe, that was the former rogue state. And as we speak about art, we had also spent a lot of effort to find the forms that went together with what we wanted to say. And here, I would say that the inspiration is really based on our studies of the preliminary course of the Bauhaus, and especially the one of Paul Klee, but also Moholy Nagy, and the course a little bit not known as the Bauhaus, which was the Soviet Wurktemas, and especially with the work, the preliminary course that El Lisitsky and Sternberg also have done in Moscow at the time. And then we arrived to this kind of form, and this is the first draft that we want to clean and to present, of course, as a final work. I have finished with my presentation. Maybe the last things I wanted to tell you is thank you. Because I see the chronometer. Thank you very much for your attention. I actually, but we can do it before maybe there is questions. I will take maybe 2 or 3 minutes to present for you because I promised it, so I have to hold my promise. This performance I had with the two very talented choreographers, where I was drawing a map of migration, and they were staging this map and ask professional dancers to dance the map. And I'm sure you will be interested to see it, but maybe we ask the question and it will be like for saying goodbye, we can show this before we leave to show this 2-3 minutes. So I know that the Norwegian audience is usually very shy and they doesn't dare to ask questions, but Toril? Oh.
Thanks so much for your presentation. That was really wonderful and learned a lot from looking at all these examples. But I was wondering, out of so many things, but one question is access to data. And because you've been working in this field for many years, and I wonder if access to data has changed during those years you've been working as a cartographer.
Absolutely, it's really an issue in itself, the data, because as you know, we without data, without information, we are nothing. So first we think about we have this intention and we have to think, this is the creation process and I would like to do this, or I suspect this, or I suspect that. Marc Lombardi, the artist Marc Lombardi, he really did not, if he has understood something is happening, between the military-industrial lobby and the king of Saudi Arabia. There was link which was really opaque, and he wanted to understand that. So he spent many years at the beginning, before he was starting to draw his beautiful artwork, to gather the information. That was not easy. But he did, and he had no Excel at that time, so that was even more difficult. The status of data has changed a lot. When I started, it was we had to go all around Europe and the world in library to open the book, to copy by hand, to put on Excel table. It has become much, and then a lot of those data was either very expensive, you had to pay, or was forbidden. The access was forbidden. It was kept confidential. Until 2000, I think the turn is 2005, 2010, I really felt that. The World Bank, suddenly, they opened everything. IMF, they opened everything. They were inviting the people to use the data, to produce figures, and to send to them. So they have created a dialogue between the users and themselves, which I found very interesting. But, also UNDP has done this with socio-economic indicators. But when it comes to more sensitive informations like oil, for example, energy and things, it's still very expensive or impossible to get. Or trade, very difficult to get trade, although there is a lot of information in UN CTAD, but there is many things in trade. And what is interesting is what happens with Alibaba, what happens with Amazon. Those data, they really tell how the world is functioning, because they are prominent. They are even sometimes much bigger than the trade of a country to another country. And for doing this, the only way to do is to scrap it. So you have those white helmets which are intruding the database and getting the data, anonymizing them, so that you can work and have an idea of what it is. So I think it's the access, to answer your question, is much more easy, and at the same time, crude data, real data that would really say something on the way our society are evaluating are still difficult to access. And this is a work in itself, and I feel that in my work, I dedicate a lot of time to get the provider of data, the owner of data, confident in what I want to do with their data. So it's a lot of time to discuss with them, to explain the project, to give the guarantee about anonymization, etc. I don't know what is your experience with the enormous amount of data you're working with, but I think that today, this part, for me, this is really half of the time to really produce something. When you speak, even the UN, I presented here a UN project, even to get those data, it was not easy, because they make it's public, it's accessible, but they make it extremely complicated in the system to arrive, and sometimes you are giving up. But now, I am at the end of my career, so to speak, because I have just a few years to go, and I will dedicate those years to produce my own data, my primary data. So I will be the insider. So I'm now mapping at a pretty large scale in Palestine, in Israel, and in these countries, and I will myself collect the data from inside. It will be my data, my observations, or the observations of a network of people I trust. And then this is a primary set of data. All my life I've been working with a second-hand data, but reliable because they were checked, etc. But you can never be sure if you are missing something, if there is a mistake, there is a thing. And we have to comply with this. We have to accept this idea of uncertainty. What I like in your question is that it's really, I think it's a discipline in itself, looking for data and trying to confront the data, to cross-check the data, to understand if the data are reliable or not. And out of those data, if we get wrong, then we draw a wrong picture of the world, and then we draw something which is not happening. It's already, if you map, for example, you have a project on child mortality, number of surgeons, number of soccer players in the world. You will use the data international, and those data, they are already 4 years old. So you are mapping a situation in 2020 because it's the best you can have. You don't have more recent data. This is anachronic, but this is the best you have, so you're obliged to do this. But what happened in 4 years, we don't know.
Hi, thank you for a really fascinating talk and for showing us some really kind of innovative ways of showing geographical and other forms of data, including multi-dimensional forms of data as well, which was really interesting. I wonder if you could say a little bit more about that and about how we might consider presenting geographical data in 3 dimensions maybe, and thinking about I don't know, volumetric forms, perhaps. You know, I'm also thinking about virtual and augmented reality ways of presenting geographic data as well.
Yes, we have absolutely. I think that the 3D, the virtual, and the interactive maps. I haven't presented these very technological 3D dimension things. We have done those for some documentaries. This is extremely interesting, and it helps to better understand the idea, because then there is an evolution. When you are static, what Toril is doing, what I'm doing, a collection of maps. I kind of love it because then you can really get, you embed in it, and you're active. You're actively walking, you're actively looking, seeking the difference between one map and the others. When you have this interactive map, you are more passive. So you look at a film, which is spectacular. There is something which is your. I was prepared to your questions, maybe. This is what it can look like.
Partout en Europe, la xénophobie gagne du terrain.
So it's in French, but,
les discours de rejet de l'étranger sont portés par les partis d'extrême droite.
So there is a whole
FN en France, FPE en Autriche,
First of
Fidesz
all,
en Hongrie,
you turn
le parti droit et
the
Justice en
projection,
Pologne.
and then you make appear the logo. So.
Pour cette extrême
And then
droite
you have the
européenne,
music, which is
faut
a
à tout
little
prix
bit
empêcher
worrying.
l'immigration. Plutôt que de s'intéresser aux causes, en partie liées aux difficultés économiques, aux conflits ou aux instabilités politiques,
The voice explains the
prône une solution
economic
technique.
context of the rise
Rendre
of
les
the
frontières
extreme right.
hermétiques possibles à des migrants
And
qui
you're
n'ont pas
still
d'autre choix que de fuir leur pays.
Actor. Now it gives the context. The idea here is also in this project to make the people comfortable. So we are subjective. We just choose the speech which are the worst they could have done about rejecting the others, etc. The colors. And now comes the map.
Préconise le retour des contrôles aux frontières.
And here you will see evaluating everything at the same time. The rise of the extreme right by the votes. In 1990, in 2000, look at France, look at Switzerland. And then suddenly Switzerland's awful. Look at Poland. And then the emergence of Hungary.
Des partis d'extrême droite siègent au gouvernement de l'Autriche. Ils sont même majoritaires en Pologne ainsi qu'en
And you can highlight.
Plus que jamais.
And also the perspective, you can change the perspective, which makes you even more engaged about it. So this is, to answer your question, I have 5 like that if you want, which shows the evolution. And you really understand, it was lasting 45 seconds. In 45 seconds, you have the whole picture. And this is, of course, extremely powerful. The only problem is that, yeah, on the website you can put it, but on the book you have to do differently. On an exhibit, you can have a screen. I'm very interested to develop that. It's just that it's a lack of, so I don't do so much because it's a lack of time, and I much prefer now to explore how you could map experiential and sensorial aspects as an insider of places. This is my research project. We work in slums in the Philippines, and with the communities, we walk all around very concentratedly in a research mode. We have a protocol to understand how the things are organized, and we map the existing. And after the kids and the people of the community, they put a layer on top of this, and they map their dream, their utopia. So you have 2 layers. The existing, which, of course, it's a slum in Philippines, so you can just imagine how awful the conditions are. But it's not us coming, it's a demand from the communities. They are very well organized, and they draw on top of that, like a second layer, how they would love to have the places. And it comes with enormous creativity. And the idea is to present this to the municipality and to confront the municipality and to say, now you have to do it, and then try to find the money to implement. Any other?
Hello. Thank you for your talk. I found really interesting how you kind of expand on what a map can be. And I like this, you said that the map is this constant dialogue between reality and imagination. And so I have a kind of maybe a bit of a nerdy question. So I was just curious on the difference, because you call all your figures for maps, but what is like the difference between a diagram and a map? Does a map always have this relationship to a landscape or a territory? Does it always have this spatiality, which is like one of the dimensions? Or?
Yes, I see. No, maybe I should have been more clear on it. I should have said, map is a very restrictive word. Actually, with my students, I have a full lesson only on the terminology. So that's why it's important, because you hear about mapping, cartography, infography, cartogram, diagram, graphic, pies, lines, graphic, whatever. So there is, I have identified, I think, 50 different ways of speaking about visual representation of something, of data. Either those data are quantitative, it's statistics, or qualitative, lists of events that you want to represent. So I should have been a little bit more clear in this, and I forgot to say that I would much prefer to say visual representation of the world of data, which involves spatiality most of the time, but not necessarily. Sometimes we have this exercise of heuristic map, which you map the relationship between events. Actually, I have also, I think I was waiting the question because I have prepared the image of at the end. I was speaking about Marc Lombardi. And this is to answer your question. Marc Lombardi, he works where he's identifying actors in the United States, the lobby industrial, military industry, the American administration, the action of corporations in Norway, in Switzerland, in Sweden, in America, the king of Saudi Arabia because of the oil, etc. And you see what he does, he's mapping this, he's putting them, and each time there is a link, he just draws a line. But of course it's a mess. This is an image de pensée, an image of thought. And he reorganized everything. And at that time, it was not on computer. It was really with the mean of art. And he will produce something which is really a work of art, but with meaning, because here he will make visible things which were completely invisible before. Look at this one. You have here George Bush or Dick Cheney. Very prominent. They are spectacular. You see them on TV. But they are the puppets in a way. They don't really have the power. There's behind them in the backstage. You have people which has much more power of decisions. This James R. Bath, Never heard of him. But actually, in the American administration, you have a whole staff behind those which are on the front scene, which are organizing, deciding, advising, which have the real power. And this is what Marc Lombardi has shown with the work he has done. He was identifying, he had a little card, green for the administration, public, and pink for all the corporations. And then thousands of them. There is a documentary where he shows that, and then he puts the maps and he sees that when there is relation, he works with researchers, with journalists, with public information. Then he put the cards together, he write the name and he make a line. So that's the first action, so this is this one. And then drawing this fantastic artwork, which has been displayed in all museums in the world. So I would say that this is a map. If I would, it's an abuse maybe of the terms, because a map involves spatiality, spatial representation. The UN project I've shown is at the same time a graphic, because it's disconnected from the geography, but the name of the country, they are more or less in the place where they should be. So this is a document which is in between. But sometimes, like Marc Lombardi, it's only names of things. So we don't speak about geography, but you have a visual representation. So probably you're right. Probably I shouldn't say that I'm a cartographer, because cartographer means you map the world, geographically speaking. And I would say that I am a visual, an information designer. So designer information, whatever it is, temporal, spatial, my fantasy, my imagination, my utopia, etc. So you're right. So if you're interested, I think I will give the presentation with all the files, put it on the website, and then you can, those working with this can download it afterwards. If there is no other things, if you let me 2 minutes so that I can show this dancing map, and then we can close. I'm cheating a little bit because I did 49 minutes, and yeah, but I think I really wanted to show you this. So these two choreographers, Kaena Sana and Nina Negri. Kaena Sana is from Tunisia. Nina Negri is from Italy. She's actually the daughter of Tony Negri, if you know who is he. And they wanted to work in a very big detail on the human trauma, which is migration or the apocalypse of most of the migratory itinerary. So they asked me, both of them, to draw a map of migration, which I did here. And you see, you have main pathways with the hub where they go. And there is a movement, there is an obvious movement from Middle East, from Asia, and from Africa. And there is places where they are unwelcome, it's in red, and there is another places where they are absolutely, totally unwelcome, this is blue. So the colors are maybe not very well chosen, but although they are unwelcome in the red area, there is a system where they can anyway enter, but Saudi Arabia, Gulf, and Russia, just forget it. So they took this map, and they started, they recruited professional dancers. Most of them are refugees or former migrants. And they started to work on the map, to redraw the movement, to identify feelings, what I'm missing, spirals, the wall, the place, the drop of water, the night, etc. So all kinds of feelings. And they have entirely redrawn the map on the stage, discussed about the movement. This is here, it's Kaena Sana, it's this wonderful choreographer from Tunisia, from Tunis, and started to work on the movement. So they have made the movement by hand with elegance, and then they have reproduced this movement after the first one is Nina Negri, and they started to we don't have the sound. In theory, there is a metronome, tack, tack. So I will do the metronome, tack, 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 tack. And then they will apply, now they are dancing the map, and they will apply all the feelings they all had during their apocalyptic itinerary, migration itinerary. They walk, and suddenly they collapse. But if they stay on the floor, they die. So they know that they have to, even if there is a lot of suffering, they have to go back away. And it's very slow. So you have to be patient. They look all around, and they will take their suitcase. On entend we hear from the, take the suitcase from the back, and with elegancy, and you go so slow. It's just one drop, and then you have to wait again very long. The performance is 40 minutes, and according to the actors of this performance, this has very much helped them to go over a trauma. For most of them, the trauma was really something enormous, and the fact that they could draw the map, that they could dance the map, they could physically express in playing into a performance what they were going through has helped them to overpass the idea. So this is also a new way of mapping, to embed ourselves on the map. I find it very interesting, and for the end of my career, which comes soon, 3-4 years, this is this kind of experiment that I would like to do, including musical, including really embedding the map into performance, because maybe it appeared that we could maybe say much more and make available much more prominently information on it. So that was it. Thank you.
I'm going to say once more, thank you. Officially, thank you very much. This was great, a great way to spend the afternoon. Yeah, enjoy the rest of the day.
Thank you for coming.